You're not going to have anything different if you don't behave or act different. Knowing that if you want to get through something hard, you have to take it one step at a time, because that's all it's about. And it is up to you as a partner, as a leader, to make sure that your partner or your clients feel good around you. So when you're building something, you have to figure out what are these things that are non-negotiables that you think are going to have such positive impact to the culture and the community that you're going to build and grow on a bigger scale.
Betting on yourself looks different for everybody, but in some cases, it comes down to what you're willing to sacrifice, what you're willing to do, and how much you actually believe in everything that you say that you stand for. It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to be about it. And today you're going to meet someone who is very much about it. This is an individual who's followed her intuition, who's built not one, but two incredible ventures philanthropically, economically, and any other kind of adjective or verb that you want to assign to it. This person is objectively accomplished across multiple areas of life, whether it's personal in finding what it takes to maximize love, or professional in terms of creating an 8-figure company that's impacted hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Please meet the athlete, entrepreneur, now founder as well of multiple companies, and just an awesome human, Anne Mahlum. How are you today?
I'm good. That was a great intro. Thank you.
I should have also said the founder of Solid Core, just to be specific, but also Back on My Feet. If people don't know what those two are, we're about to let them know. I'd be shocked if they didn't. But I actually started the research back with the TED Talk 11 years ago. That was oh my God, I can't believe this person's been getting after it for this long, but the keynote speaking is it seems where your passion is almost.
Yeah, I think so right now, just because, I'm in this state of empowerment, and getting on stage and speaking still gives this incredible thrill for myself where, it requires a lot of skill set. I have a couple keynotes that I do, but that's a lot about reading the room and making the joke and performing. So it's massive growth opportunity for yourself to get in front of an audience and be captivating enough for 45 minutes to an hour that people are paying attention. So I like the challenge of that. And I like empowering people to level up their own lives on what they think is possible for themselves through storytelling and sharing examples of my own life. So yeah, I'm kind of, I'm not in any rush to start another business anytime soon. I always tell people I feel like I know too much now. And so I love the speaking, the investing, and the advising part of helping other people win.
One of the cool parts about that particular TED Talk is you present yourself as having your entire life figured out by the time you're 12 years old.
Yes.
Then things very much go into a unanticipated chaos, for lack of a better way of putting it. And you find a way to channel all of that emotion and start helping homeless men get their lives back on track by building out an organization called Back on My Feet. I'd love if you could spend a couple minutes sharing what the organization is and educating people on what the mission of the organization is and how it's impacted you today.
Yeah, so the mission is to use running as a vehicle to help people currently living in homeless shelters change their identity so that we can create self-sufficiency in their lives. So if that sounds a little sort of high level and broad stroking, if you think about it, somebody who's homeless, Jonathan, most people don't have a positive association of that individual, and that individual themselves is constantly reiterating that they are homeless, meaning they screwed up somewhere, that, their life didn't go as planned. Maybe there was addiction involved, something that you find yourself, particularly as a grown man, ending up, dependent on a homeless shelter. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on self-worth, on self-value, on self-love. And if we can get those individuals to change their identity through the sport of running, to see themselves as somebody who is a runner, a teammate, disciplined, reliable, an athlete, focused, change the association of self Well, then and only then are we going to be able to talk about getting them a job, different trajectory in life, and hopefully ends up in more independent housing. I didn't have a background in homelessness or social services, but I had felt, up to 27, just my own personal story with my dad's addictions and understanding, I think, a little bit of why people are motivated. And if you don't feel good about who you are or your capabilities, you're never going to make change. I don't care if you're homeless or not. You have to feel like it's possible for you. So that's where, we had to start with these particularly group of people that I came in contact with.
How has running impacted your life?
Oh my God, it changed everything for me. Well, I started working out at a pretty young age for the wrong reasons. I had a boy when I was 14 or so tell me that I was fat. And so, as a girl, it was like I let this belief system permeate me that my value to men was based off of how I look. And that stayed with me for a long time. But when I was 16, I started running because of my dad's addictions. And I just had to get this energy out of me to deal with kind of how my family life was unfolding. And running is filled with metaphors around everything, right? Taking one step forward, knowing that if you want to get through something hard, you have to take it one step at a time, that there are going to be hills in all of our lives, and we have choices to make when those hills show up. We can either look for excuses and turn around or go left or go right, or we can do the work and hope that the reward for the work is a flatter road on the top of that hill with maybe some less potholes. So it just like embodied everything about a philosophy that I was buying into. So I started running out when I was 16. And by the time I was 26, I had done several marathons already. So I understood the power that it held, and it just made me feel invincible. It made me feel in control. It made me feel like I was moving forward, of course, literally, but, metaphorically as well.
Running definitely is one of those things that I don't know how much you know about my background, but running over the last few years has led me to some pretty incredible places. Also, a few marathons. Last year, I did a 58-mile ultra
Oh, wow.
marathon,
Congrats.
and thanks. And now I'm training for a sub 3, and it's just completely different like elements. And I mean, I'm sure it's deconstructing those limiting beliefs, and people don't like to run. Even runners who run don't like to run. How have you managed the conversation in your head when you don't want to do things to get up and go?
I feel like a lot of times I don't really have that battle anymore because I have lasered into myself that there's so much reward in doing the difficult thing. Like I can feel, I've had so many moments after a run where the runner's high. I've had so many workouts now being 44. Like I don't have to wonder and be like, am I going to feel good if I go work out or not? Like I just have too much evidence. So I love the hard work, especially physically. I am in this sort of phase in my life where I want to be physically exhausted at the end of every day. And that's how I will know if I spent my time, wisely. And it's interesting because after selling Solid Core, and having the kind of financial situation that I do, it's easy to have a lot of comfort in your life. And don't get me wrong, there are things that we have outsourced, right? We have a full-time house manager, somebody who frankly cooks our food, helps with laundry, cleans, handles all of the landscaping and everything around here, because we don't find joy in those things. Those are things to us that we're like, there's not a lot of value that makes sense there. So we're going to outsource, these sort of things. But we're not going to outsource working out. We're not going to outsource doing the hard work to earn, our health or our elite performance on the volleyball court. So those things still are just super rewarding for me and for my husband.
When you went about, you mentioned identity shifting earlier. When you went about aligning a new identity for yourself, helping homeless men also reshape their identity, how did you start thinking about the problem in that way?
I think from a young age, I don't know where it came from, but I did understand belief systems as a teenager, and that what you believe about yourself is how you will show up. And I started telling myself as a teenager that I was going to be somebody someday, that I'm capable, that I'm special enough to make impact. And the more you tell yourself these things, the more you start to step into action to support what you're saying, because no one wants to feel like a fraud and no one wants to feel like they're wrong. So moving away for college when, 99% of my friends were staying in North Dakota, I knew if I wanted to be special or I wanted to make impact, I'm going to have to break free of this construct that is around me, right? Like being special or being unique is in essence going against the grain. So I had to put myself in situations that were going to be unfamiliar. And the more often you do that, becomes less scary because you're stacking evidence that, oh, I can figure this thing out. Going through that on my own life and moving cities and trying new things, it just resonated, with me when I saw these group of guys that like their sense of self has been so beaten down. And the way that people approach homelessness is thinking, oh, well, you solve homelessness by giving people a home. And I'm like, not if they're working through an active addiction, right? Because they need to be responsible enough to pay rent, to go to work. And my experience with my dad, I just was super well aware that you have to get somebody to make good decisions and you have to get them to want to make good decisions. And that wasn't something that I could force upon somebody. I would present an opportunity that was a positive environment, that had a positive feedback loop. And the hope was that they would see that environment as something that they wanted to be a part of. Why? Because it made them feel good. They were being seen, appreciated, celebrated, cheered for, and watching the behavior, Jonathan, reiterated for me that like humans are all the same. That's what we're all looking for. We want environments where we can succeed in. We want environments that lift us up. And so it was just like, this is a massive void in this sector of homelessness that nobody's doing that. In fact, I saw them being treated in the shelters like crap, right? All of the people in the system reminded all of these men that they were homeless, that they messed up, that they made mistakes, and therefore they're in this homeless shelter. And so what we were trying to do is like, be like, the past is the past, and you have a chance today to make a better decision. And if you can make a better decision in the morning at 5:30 a.m. and go for a run, it's like anything else, right? If you eat a breakfast that's healthy, your chances of eating a lunch that is healthy is like skyrocketed. But first thing in the morning, if you push the snooze button, if you miss your workout, my husband likes to call it the F it button. Like one bad decision leads to another. It's why mornings and morning routines are so important, because they set up your day either in the right way or the wrong way.
There's so much I want to talk to you about, and I'm going to try to pack it into this episode because I know your time is valuable. You're a philanthropist. You are a serial entrepreneur. It's these crazy aspects that somehow have a dichotomy, but at the same time go hand in hand, right? One's about creating so much value. The other is about giving back, but the other part's about capturing a portion of that value. And the other is giving with no expectation. You're a giver. How has philanthropy and giving to community, creating community, which is another thing I want to talk to you about, impacted your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, I mean, most people do it the opposite, right? They like start the company, build the company, have money, and then whether there's guilt or I don't know what, but it's like, okay, now I want to start, something philanthropic. And I think that a lot of people, that sends the wrong message, which is that you can only be philanthropic when you're rich. I didn't have any money starting back on my feet, literally zero net worth. I probably had, a few grand in credit card debt, but I wanted my life to be fulfilling. And I wanted to have purpose and joy, and that was going to come from helping people. And I discovered about myself that I get really fired up about helping people discover their potential and that they're capable of so much more than they give themselves credit for, which is why, again, I like to speak and empower folks today. And so I like to say, you're either a giving person or you're not. When you get more money, it doesn't all of a sudden make you philanthropic. Like you'll be rich, but you might be a cheap rich person. So I don't really care how much you have. Everybody can give in some regard, whether it's in monetary form or time or advice or something. So I've just always found it a part of my my personality. And I don't weaponize, money, Jonathan. Like if I give something, if I give to my family, my friends, a stranger, I don't expect anything in return. And I also don't hold it over people's head or remind them, that like, hey, I gave you this, therefore you owe me. So I think if you're going to give, you need to do so without strings attached.
There's a couple sentiments I want to share with you in case you haven't heard them, just because I know you're such a giver. When you give, it makes room for more to come in. That's something that has always resonated with me because, like, quite literally, I can envision the bandwidth that I get when I give. And, like, everything that I've done, whether it was the marathons, ultra marathons, and a couple other pretty intense physical challenges, there's always some philanthropic element tied to it that's led to raising awesome amounts of money because people align with the causes. And then the other one that is unfortunately escaping me at this second, I'll run by you. But the next thing that I want to get into is how you set boundaries. There's a crazy demand on your time, and I'm very grateful that you're willing to share it here today. But people ask you for advice and insight and consulting all the time, but you're very particular about what you say yes and no to. How do you delineate between opportunities and drains?
Yeah, so I say no a lot more than I say yes. That's just a phase of the life that I'm in, but it doesn't mean I think my impact can be less. So for example, I'm pretty active on social media, and sure, I share some things about my own life, but my social media is about education. It's about education and empowerment. So if you want to learn from me, those are the best channels to do so. And it's how I can feel I can be most impactful. Choosing podcasts to do that I feel are either audiences that I haven't tapped into yet, that someone has a platform that I can hopefully share something that can have a positive impact. It's an hour of my time that hopefully reaches, hundreds, if not thousands of people. So again, I think about the time value of money and the time value of energy. And so I look at things like that. If I'm going to get really involved in something and say, okay, I want to invest or I want to, sit on this board on something, it has to be something I'm really, passionate and excited about, that I think is going to be a ton of fun, that I think I'm going to add a lot of value to, and that I'm going to get something in return, whether it is the experience of it or, a monetary outcome that I'm looking for. So I try to do things on a mass scale if I know I can't have one-on-one conversations. So I'll do things like mass mentoring once every, 4 to 6 weeks, where I'll pick a topic that I feel like is relevant, that I feel I am educated enough to speak on, put it out there. People can join the call for free, and they get an hour and a half to come and listen and ask questions. So it's things like that, again, I look from an efficiency standpoint to try to help in areas where I feel like I have something that I can teach people and qualified to speak on.
It's actually crazy because I am big on inputs, and I'm very particular these days about the podcasts that I listen to. And so if something doesn't capture or keep my attention or make me feel like I'm learning to some degree about topics that not just reinforcement learning, but that I actually need to learn at this season of life, kids, family, you get it, right? It has to amplify the mission. It has to point me in some form of directional certainty towards the thing that I'm after. And listening to you get interviewed, it is so value driven, like from entrepreneurial advice of how you handled conversations with landlords about how you'd leverage their interest. I was like mind blown at your negotiation skills at a stage where candidly you didn't have that much leverage. How did you navigate those conversations? What was the mindset in negotiating where you didn't have leverage?
Necessity. It was literally like I couldn't afford to scale if I couldn't get the landlords on my side and help them. I wanted them to look at me, Jonathan, and be like, that girl's going to win. And it was my job to convince them of that, for them to give me the deal that I needed in order to succeed, while also understanding what they needed. And what you'll find a lot in business, especially a business that has a lot of, in commercial real estate, it's a little esoteric, and it's family money and everything else. And there's this phrase that gets passed around a lot, which is, that's just the way it's been done. And I'm like, okay, let's unpack that for a second, because if I can solve the problem a different way, where we're both set up to succeed isn't that what we both want anyway? And landlords just like to negotiate for the sake of negotiating. So it's just understanding, who's on the other side of the table. But it was out of absolute necessity for me. I didn't have a whole, I had 175K, which went into my first studio. Now that first studio at Solidcore was profitable. So I was taking the profits from that studio going into the second. But I was using the landlord's, TI dollars, tenant improvement dollars, and the rent abatement where I didn't have to pay rent, where I was producing cash flow from that studio being open and just like putting it into the next studio. So for a lot of people, that requires a high risk tolerance, which I had because I felt with such conviction. I knew Solidcore, the workout was incredible, but I knew the brand could be national. But I had to get that speed to market, and I had to get the momentum in the first year or two to become kind of the, who is this girl? And she's scaling and she's successful, which would just give me more leverage, as we opened up more and more. But I'll tell you what, when you've got places that have one studio or one location for 2 years and then they try to scale, it's difficult. It's like, well, why have you only opened one of these in the last 2 years? If there was such demand for this, you would have more than that. So there's a marketing and consumer and just human psychology that comes in. And have you ever read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini?
Parts of it. I know it.
Yeah, it's an incredible book because, again, it's like why humans do what they do. And I find stuff like that fascinating. And I've taken a lot of those lessons. That one, Chris Voss, never split the difference. These are master negotiators and they're top of their game. And like, I just think the world that we live in with the information on YouTube and social media and frankly, old school books, it's just like, there's so much knowledge out there that's there for you to learn and apply to what you're doing.
There's this notion of wisdom is about questions. I would like to inquire, what are some of the questions that you've asked yourself that have helped you cultivate self-sufficiency, shift your identity, build a business to the point you sold it for over $98 million? What are some of those questions that you've asked yourself that have led to those immense disproportionate outcomes?
Oh my gosh. I think if you don't have curiosity as an entrepreneur, you're not going to make it because that's all it's about, right? I mean, as a kid growing up in North Dakota, it was literally like looking around at everything that existed and everybody's life was homogeneous. Everybody lived the same life. And I'm like, this doesn't seem that exciting. There has to be another way to do this. I don't want to, wake up miserable, hoping for Friday, hating my job. It's like the, means to an end. I'm just like, this just feels like I don't want to sign up for this. So that alone of there's got to be a different way to do this. I'm going to go discover. I'm going to start learning. I'm going to go research. That was what caused me to go away for college. And then I went to, intern for my U.S. Senator in D.C. the summer before my senior year in college. Then I moved out to DC. I just wanted exposure to all of the different opportunities that were available from a professional perspective. And I wanted to see how other people lived. So that alone, right, was particularly that. And it's just like, well, why do things have to be this way? A lot of people is also, and I don't know which book this was, probably Malcolm Gladwell, but like when a doctor walks into a room and it's a white male, tall with the white coat on, these people never get questioned because we are trained. A doctor, right, is one of the smartest people ever. You never question a doctor, let alone a tall white male. Like it's like he knows everything. And most people fall into that line of behaving and adhering to authority. And I've never been that way. I probably was a pain in the ass a lot, but I'm just like, well, why? I literally was in a jet ski accident, trauma center, whatever. And it's like, Anne needs a blood transfusion. And I'm like, can you please look up this doctor and make sure, they're like, she needs a blood transfusion now. And I'm like, do we know this guy? Like, it's not that I don't trust people, but I advocate for myself and I'm going to make sure that I'm making the best decision for me, regardless if it's always been done that way. So curiosity is key. If something doesn't feel like this is the right deal for me, or there has to be a different way, you have to be willing to figure out a different way to do it, or at least ask the question, well, why do we have to do things that way? I mean, sorry to belabor the point, Jonathan, but I used to tell my team that my team you guys can ask me any question you want. And the answers you will never hear from me. You might not like my answer, right? Just because I give you an answer doesn't mean you're going to like it. But what I will never say to you is, well, that's just the way that we've always done it, or because I'm the boss. Those are bullshit answers, and you should never accept them. There needs to be some reasoning, behind why we're doing something. And I think it's okay to push back on any of that stuff.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in.
On that same note of asking questions, the other thing that stands out about you is the specificity component. You had specific calls to action when you were raising money from Back on My Feet for Solid Core to the dollar to the penny.
Wow, you really did do your research.
Oh, come on, I'm not going to waste your time. It's one of those things that you got to know what you're talking about, especially if you're going to sit across from someone who's very particular about how they spend their time. So it's one of those things that, and I also think it's so value driven, right? I have a background as an attorney. So like specificity is key. You can't just be over broad and talk around things like people love to give attorneys reputations for. It's one of those things that when I heard you say it, I already know it. We hear it all the time in social media, have a call to action, but you were asking for checks and you were asking for advances. You were asking for trust. What made you think about specificity as this strategy to get to where you're at?
Well, when you have specificity, people trust you more. They feel like you know what you're talking about. So if you try to go raise money and you're just like, oh, we'd love for you to make a donation. Okay. So great, here's $100. And if I was hoping you were going to give me $100,000, that's on me because I don't know my audience. I need to make the ask of you and also tell you what this money is going to go for and why I'm asking for it. And I don't bat 1,000 a lot, but I'm pretty sure I batted 1,000 or close to 1,000 in raising money for Back on My Feet because I only took meetings when I was going around the country. I only took meetings with C-level people, maybe some senior VPs, depending on the size of the company, right? Because those were the decision makers. I wasn't going to sit and, meet with a marketing coordinator or a marketing manager who had no authority, who then was going to have to take my ask to the decision maker, not do a good enough job that I could do if I was in front of you. So I just wouldn't take the meeting. I would try to get to that person. And even better if they worked out, even better if they were a runner, right? So I knew I could get them to understand what Back on My Feet did. And I would talk to them about running. Now we have something in common. And when people give money, they're not really giving to the cause. They need to have some affinity toward it or some relation to it, but they're giving to the person who sits across to the table from them. And that goes the same with raising money for capital in your startup. Yeah, they might like your business and you need to have good numbers. But if they have all of that, but they don't trust you and there's something about you that makes them uneasy, I don't care how good the business is, you're not going to get a deal. So I just feel like, again, understanding that at Back on My Feet. So when I went to a meeting with a C-level person, I had, 2 asks. One was for the check, and 2 was, can you please make 3 introductions to me of people of your similar caliber that you think would be interested in what we're doing? So it was just great. Now, Jonathan, you're going to reach out to one of your friends who trusts you, and you're actually going to be so impressed by me that you're going to find it enjoyable to connect me to your friend and be like, you got to meet Ann. And like, there was something of street cred value that you would get with your friend or social cred value for like bringing me to them. And I took that really seriously, like your reputation and people connecting me. Like I always said, like I will close the deal. I just need the connection. And so that is something that I took with me into Solid Core for the negotiations with the landlords and negotiations with private equity. I did not go into private equity looking to raise money. I went into my every single deal looking to raise. The first one was 18 million. The second one was 50 million. And like, here's why, and here's what we're doing with it, so that there was no ambiguity about my ability to understand what my businesses is needed in regard to the financial ask that I was making.
It's interesting because usually you hear the sentiment of give, 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 ask. And obviously you're giving. You gave in a different way and then parlayed it into other things. But in that particular situation, you didn't necessarily, you had an opportunity to bet on that could pay dividends, right?
Yeah.
And you had to persuade to that effect. But the thing that I want to ask is you're making back-to-back asks, right? You're asking for a check and then you're asking for an introduction. I'd argue that the introduction is almost more valuable than the check. So how do you double down on the specificity of asking for raising funds and an introduction? How do you drive that much value in an interaction to get both?
Well, actually, I think they're pretty low lifts, like a check, right? Asking, and again, whenever I was usually raising money across the country, we had an event that I tied to opening the chapter there. So I would ask for, again, depending on who it was, I'd make my ask appropriate, whether it was $10,800, $22,400 to buy a table, sponsor X level. I actually made 3 asks when I was doing that. It was 1, buy a table or 2, and please fill the table with people that you think will have some relevance or this will resonate with them, and then make the connections. But sending 3 emails to people that you thought would get a kick out of me and enjoy meeting me, that was going to take you, 5-10 minutes. It just wasn't that big, of an ask. And like I said, it was my job to convince that person that I was actually going to give them credibility with their contacts and friends for being like, thank you for introducing me to Anne. Like, she's amazing and what she's doing is awesome. And like, we were so excited to get involved. So I was actually felt like I was doing them a little bit of a favor rather than them, me having them be inconveniencing them in some way.
That's a very positive self-image to maintain, because I think a lot of people think they're a legend in their own mind without anything to substantiate their actual contributions. So they just go around asking for things, never getting, wondering why they're not receiving. So it's cool to see how you've channeled an energy, and energy is a big part of it, right? That was so clear in terms of the mission that you were on and building back on my feet. But then again, with Solid Core, the other aspect that is so evident in your skill set is your ability to build community. What are some of the key pillars in building community that have worked for you?
Yeah, thank you. It's one of the things, we all have this stuff where an 8 and a 9 and a 10 at, and then we have things where a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 at. I have plenty in those buckets, but I know what I'm really, really good at. And building authentic, high quality branded experiences, usually around health and fitness. And now I'm doing it with volleyball in my backyard, is what I excel at. So any community I'm building has to be authentic, meaning this is something that I'm totally in. I'm a part of, I love it. And so it's easy to sell. And the second one is it has to be fun, right? So like the vibe you're building has to be fun. It has to make people feel good. And both Back on My Feet and Solid Core, we were just chatting briefly before this started. We talked about, Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And saying people's names, right, was really, really important. And so that happened at Back on My Feet every morning. It's like, go around, say your name, introduce. And so everybody was just calling members by their names. And if we didn't know their name, it was like, oh, can you remind me of your name again? We would take photos and these guys would be like, you want to take a photo with me? It was just like we were building up their self-esteem and making them feel good. So we were celebrating them. Solid Core, people ask the differences and the similarities with building these things. I'm like, the community building was the exact same. I needed to create an environment where people felt challenged, right? Because Solid Core's workout is hard, but so rewarding when you finish, and that we're celebrating. So even today, as big as Solid Core is, your 100th class, hopefully you're walking in that studio and there is a sign that says like, it's Jonathan's 100th class. And we have different milestones. I think it's 1, 250, 500, and 1,000. So we are fully aware that we're tracking the number of times that you've come into our space, and we're letting you know how much we appreciate you. When you open your app, it tells you the number of classes that you've taken. We do challenges. And so we're rewarding you for like showing up 2 to 3 times a week, giving you little coins and badges. So those things, which sound so elementary, are so important to adults. We all have love languages and we all need affirmations on some level at home and at work. And it is up to you as a partner, as a leader, to make sure that your partner or your clients feel good around you, that you bring out the best version of them and they want to be a part of the environment you're building.
To recap, the two things that stood out were challenge and celebration.
Mm-hmm.
Putting someone in a position to feel that they're experiencing something just outside the bounds of their skill set that is still possible with a little bit extra effort. And then also acknowledging their efforts that they're putting forth, consciously, subconsciously, putting them in an environment that also empowers them because they're realizing what they're capable of because they tried this thing, were brave enough, and they're around people that are acknowledging them by name. So those are very, when you think about it, it makes sense why people would want to return to environments like that and then tell someone about it naturally, right? Referrals are the best kind of business. And I know that was the key theme with Solid Core, right? It was like, make it so challenging that you'd bring your friend because you tried this out and it's like, you got to go. I'm so sore. I sweat. I can't believe it. Look at my core. My body's changing. You got to come check this out. It's a real deal.
Yeah. I mean, our marketing campaign for a while was one, this is the hardest workout you've never done. And the second one was, it's not for everybody. And that, we would say it's not for everybody. And then we would list the kind of person who it's for, which is like, if you want to work hard, if you push yourself, if, blah, all these different things. And then subconsciously people are like, well, yeah, I want to be that kind of person. And so, you show up. But yeah, it's like when you see someone walking around with a Solid Core shirt and you do Solid Core, you're kind of like, I get you. Like we're the same type of person. And so it creates that thing, just like running, right? If you know somebody who's a runner in the morning, that's why they all wave at each other. There is a special code between runners, and that takes a lot of discipline. And you are someone I respect and admire simply because I know that you wake up at 5:30 and go running. So that's how powerful that was for the Back on My Feet members when it came to getting them jobs. It's like, hey, James wakes up 3 times a week, never late, positive attitude, been team member of the month 4 times. Like this is somebody you want to hire for an hourly job or something that they had available at Marriott. So we just opened doors from showing that they had these, strong behavioral traits of a good employee.
That's so powerful because then to your point, it goes to that identity shift where they start to take themselves more seriously because they're committed to something that forces them to be accountable and deliver on their performance. The other aspect, 2 more topics that I would be remiss if I didn't touch on with you. The other quote that I was thinking of was the Naval Ravikant quote about desire. Desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy till you get what you want.
Yeah.
That reminded me of what you put those guys through, where they had to show up on day 1, sign a contract acknowledging and holding them accountable for showing up 3 times a week, the tardiness to make sure they'd be ready to go. And if they didn't show up, that would count against them and they could potentially get removed from the group. And they just took you so seriously from the outset. What was your thought process going into that experience?
Well, I knew if there wasn't structure and I made it so lax that it was never gonna take off, right? And I also wanted them to know from me that I knew that they were capable of excellence, that the standards that I was setting, they were capable of achieving. It didn't matter, again, what their past was. And I felt it in that room that night, that first night that, before we had our first run and before it was a big organization, it was palpable that these guys were like waiting for someone to look at them and see their potential, not their past. And like, I can still remember the nodding of the heads and like, yeah, like, I want to do this. And I do think when you are the kind of leader that can inspire people to dig in deep and ask themselves, am I capable of this? Because this woman thinks I am. And maybe I am. I'm going to sit up a little bit taller. And then you look around and you have, 8 other people in that room who are also game and going to hold each other accountable. Like it was a really important, critical part of that organization's beginning was setting those standards. And that goes for anything that you're starting culturally, and it's same thing with Solid Core. It was like every coach got trained on, you have to learn every single person's name in class. And when you get eval'd, If you don't know every person, I don't care if you've got to write it down on a sheet. I don't care how you do it, but you have to learn the names. It is what will make or break this culture and community. And if we're not stringent about it, as we grow and get bigger, it'll just become lost, because we will show that other coaches will see like, oh, well, you're not holding anybody else accountable. It can't be that important to, the ethos of this brand because it's good over here and not over here. So when you're building something, you have to figure out what are these 3 or 4 or 5 things that like are non-negotiables that you think are going to have such positive impact to the culture and the community that you're going to build and grow on a bigger scale.
That's so powerful and it forces so much reflection that people have to audit not just their workflows, but their values. I know you're big on values. One of those things that if you don't know what you stand for, you're going to fall for anything. And having them cemented into your being, into your identity is essential. It's one of the first things that I teach in seminars or continuing legal educations to attorneys is knowing what you stand for, having a clear vision, also having standards and values. So this way, you have a North Star, you know what you're aiming towards, because otherwise you're just going to get lost and wonder why nothing's happening in your favor. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about was, you had this foresight for solid core. Once you identified a trend, fitness trends tend to come and go. People like to ride the waves of cold plunges or saunas or high rocks or CrossFit or whatever the thing is. Where's fitness going, in your opinion? What does it look like in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're honestly just scratching the surface. 75% of the US population doesn't work out consistently. And that those numbers are changing when you look at the younger populations, right? They're drinking way less. They are socializing through fitness. They are looking for community from fitness. They want their social wallet to be dedicated to fitness. So I think you're going to see it broaden. That's why you're seeing things like saunas and otherships and, all these sort of additional ways besides just working out, where it's like, oh, we can go sit in a sauna and catch up versus, going to a bar and having a couple of drinks. So I think it's going to be a bigger part of, instead of just like the 1 hour a day that people like go to work out 3-4 times a week, I think you're going to see some sort of health and wellness, whether it's like going for a walk, the grounding, the sunlight, going for the actual workout, then doing the stretching and recovery. I think you're going to see that number increase. I mean, on an average, probably 90 minutes. But for people like me, listen, I played beach volleyball for 2.5 hours, 5-6 days a week. I'm also in the gym for 90 minutes, 5 days a week. I'm in the sauna every single day, probably maybe 7 out of 8 days or 9 out of 10 days or something like that. And I'm cold plunging, half of the week. I'm outside, I'm walking. So it's a massive part of my life, but I think you're going to see it grow in that aspect. And then I think you're going to see from an actual workout perspective, Jonathan, we're just getting smarter and smarter, right? Like whether we're a man or a woman, we're getting much more information on the types of workouts that we should be doing based off of the results that we're looking to have for ourselves and our body. I am still about building, muscle, right? I'm 44, so I got to fight against hormonal changes and gravity. And I have to be lifting heavy 5 days, a week and be really diligent about that. Someone else may be trying to get better performance on the basketball court. So I think the more personalized fitness is going to continue to be available for those who are super, super serious. But I'll go back to my earlier point. I think it's just going to permeate so much more of people's lives, and the sitting, the watching a movie or watching TV or sitting at a bar, I think is just going to gradually decrease.
I've had so much fun. You drive so much value through each answer, and I know what that's like because these are questions, burning questions that I know people deal with on a daily basis. How do I make that change? How do I make money? Like I want to give, or I feel unfulfilled, but I have no money to give, but there's other ways to give. And you're a prime example of what it looks like when you give, when you don't have, and how it can lead to something down the line. And a big theme was, and this was another thing I wanted to share with you, the benefit of being a good person is that you get to be a good person.
Yeah.
And it rewards people in these subtle ways that, you don't necessarily expect, but end up better than you can imagine. There's a question that I ask everyone on this podcast that I'd like to pose to you, unless there's something you want to share before.
You know, you mentioned that a lot of people struggle with XYZ, and they do. And the biggest culprit of that is people get paralyzed by inaction. And we forget, people are like, well, what if it doesn't work out? And I'm like, then pivot, then change your mind. You want more fulfillment. You got to spend your Friday night in a different manner. I think people just think, I'll keep doing the same thing. And at some point, you know, I'll find, and it's like, yeah, that's again, the definition of insanity. So try doing something different on a Friday or different on a Sunday than watching, you know, sports or TV. Go volunteer somewhere, go for a hike, go into a neighborhood you've never been to before, talk to strangers. But you're not going to have anything different if you don't behave or act different. And it's going to feel uncomfortable. You're probably not going to want to, because your amygdala tries to get you to not do anything new, and it wants you not to struggle, and it doesn't want change. So the only way to fight against that is to window shop. You've got to try some things on and be like, oh, I really enjoyed volunteering, or like, I went to this new church group or something, and like, I actually really enjoyed it. So you have to just try. Otherwise, you're going to be feeling stuck for the foreseeable future.
And you're living proof of that. It's cool to see how it's come full circle for you in a lot of ways, practicing what you preach. So this question that I ask everyone is, if the future version of you from 10 years from now were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think she would say to you?
Oh, well, gosh, I don't, where I say I want to be in 10 years has nothing to do with actual goals, so to speak. It has to do with, I want to feel a certain way. So I'm in the point of my life where I have reached, it's not complacency, but it's content and maintenance, so to speak, right? So like, I need to keep doing a lot of what I'm already doing. There's not a lot of things that I need to start, because I've figured all of those things out. So I think that she would say, Anne, you're doing a great job of not taking things for granted. You are prioritizing your health, and you are making the right decisions for you now that is going to benefit us in 10 years from now. So thank you for that.
That's awesome. I think it's important to focus on the feeling, know what feeling you're chasing, and to have that clarity, that's going to create speed. Thank you so much for the time tonight. Please let everyone know where they can keep up with your journey.
Yeah, I think just try not to do all the social media. It's overwhelming. So Instagram is probably the best place to find me. And I post on there pretty often. It's just my name, Anne Mahlum.
Awesome. Again, thank you for tuning into this episode. If you got any value out of it, please rate, review, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow Anne on social media. And as always, my name is Jonathan Cohen, and this is Inside the Inspired.